twice. Yeah.
All right, grab a cookie if you haven't already. They're from Insomnia Cookies, which I've heard is good. For all you meat eaters out there, I can't have gluten. Welcome to this week's sports seminar. Our speaker today is Amy Bruza Casey. Did I get it right?
You got it right.
Yes.
Sounds like a plant species.
Someday.
It's rhythmic. It's nice. She's a horticulturalist, a therapist, and a social worker. And she's part of the NC Cooperative Extension. And her title is Therapeutic Horticulture Program Manager. And she also has a private practice where she works with clients through plant and garden-based therapy activities. And today she'll be talking about bridging the gap between plants and wellness, which I think is a great theme for 2025. So, so everyone, let's welcome Amy.
Thank you. I'm probably the only social worker in the department. So my perspective is going to look a little bit different than maybe what you're used to, but hopefully you'll find something exciting and interesting with the way that I see our relationship to plants.
You need to click on the screen.
On the screen.
Because I was, on the screen and now. And you press your arrow. That's good.
We had it looking.
Oh. Now it's.
Here we go. All right, good. So, all the pictures that I've included in here are from my professional practice and my private practice. So if you have any questions about where we are, I can tell you. So this is me. I have 2 degrees in social work. I have a certificate in therapeutic horticulture from the program that I now co-instruct in. And then I have another certificate in horticultural therapy, and we'll talk about what the difference is. Started here in May of last year, so I'm a fairly new person with the staff, but I'm really excited to be here, and you'll see why in a minute. The big part of my job, the large part, is maintaining our partnership with UNC Chapel Hill's North Carolina Botanical Garden. Together, we co-instruct the 4 online therapeutic horticulture courses. We have students from everywhere. We'll talk about that too. But in my spare time, I am the resource for county agents all over, all 100 counties. If they have a therapeutic horticulture program, they're thinking about one. If they have volunteers that are asking about it, I'm a resource for helping them get started and making sure that they are set up for success. So this is a map of the United States with all of the states shaded in red that have a state extension therapeutic horticulture. So way to go, North Carolina. Seriously, one of my tasks this summer, hopefully when I have some downtime from the courses this summer, I will be contacting the other 49 states to absolutely make sure that this is the case. But in a preliminary survey, there's nobody else at the state level doing therapeutic horticulture in extension. So it's lonely at the top, bottom, in the middle. Other states do have extension programs doing therapeutic horticulture, but it's usually at their county level or at a service unit level. There's not a state subject matter expert in any other state at this time. That might change. I've had conversations with Ohio and with Rhode Island so far that are interested in adding this to what they're doing because they see the need. So, this is a little more hopeful. The courses that we're teaching since 2020, it's a 5-year-old program. We have helped educate over 600 professionals, students, and volunteers, 45 states and 19 countries to take our knowledge out into their community, which is really exciting. And that's a partnership with the Botanical Garden. So you might be wondering, what is this therapeutic horticulture? So I'll use the 2 terms, but not interchangeably because they're not interchangeable. You may have heard them sort of bandied around that it's horticultural therapy or therapeutic horticulture. Think of therapeutic horticulture as the big table, the long table. that includes everybody doing plant-based wellness activities. There's room for everybody there. We enhance people's well-being through active or passive involvement in plant-related activities. So that's really vague. It's a broad definition. It's less likely to be done in a clinical setting. So we could all go right outside into this beautiful garden in front of the building and have a therapeutic horticulture session together. No need for a clinical setting for that. Horticultural therapy, which I also have, that's what the HTR on the end of my name is. That's a clinical designation. So that means that most people that are also working with the participants have a license or a certification in their area. So that's going to be doctors, nurses, occupational therapists, recreational speech therapists, physical therapists, and horticultural therapists. And those are people that have very high needs in general. And you're looking at a clinical plan with very specific goals and outcomes for individuals. So it's still a lot of fun, but it takes a lot more planning and a lot more coordination to deliver a horticultural therapy program. So that's a clinical focus, but what we're doing here through NC State is focusing on the therapeutic horticulture, which you could see the HTs down at the end of the table with the clinical stuff. They've got their white coats on and their plants and they're ready to go. And then everybody else is included in therapeutic horticulture.
You know what, Amy, I'm noticing that the audience can't see you
Oh.
on that side of the podium.
Should I come over
There,
here?
that's nice. Yeah.
Better, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so now I'm. All right, so key program components to keep in mind. Obviously plants, right? You use diverse species to think through different sensory experiences that people can have in groups. And then you're thinking also plant-based and garden-based activities. So that can be anything from looking through a seed catalog to plan for the garden for the year, learning about plants when it's foul weather like we've had for the last few days, planting, cultivating, harvesting, cooking what you've grown, designing and learning. Since this is NC State, I always include an educational component in any of the groups that I run. So instead of just putting some plants down and giving a vague description, we learn the nomenclature and the things about the plants, and hopefully everybody goes away and learns a little bit more about horticulture than they did when they started. In a therapeutic horticulture group, you're going to look more about group goals than individual goals, but there's always a measurable outcome that you're looking for. So it's an intentional activity. So I get these questions a lot, and I always try to put this slide in anything that I'm showing. What is not? It's not herbal medicine. We can find things that can help us feel better. Carlos and I were talking beforehand about some remedies that have been used for a long time to cure different things. We don't do herbal medicine necessarily in therapeutic horticulture, but we can expose people to different things that are not harmful and might be helpful, and it's a good thing. So we're not using plants to heal illnesses, but we're using plants to encourage wellness. In therapeutic horticulture, we're not growing controlled substances. That's some people have interpreted it as like a euphemism for growing controlled substances. That's not what we're doing. It's not a plant hospital. Every so often I'll get an email with somebody that has a plant in distress and they think I'll email a therapeutic horticulturist and that person will know how to help my plant. Well, I'm an Alamance County Master Gardener as well, so I can sometimes answer their plant questions, but we're not a plant hospital. We do often take care of distressed plants, but that's not our purpose. It's not just gardening together. Sometimes that's what our groups look like. It looks like a group that's out there in the garden together, but there is an intention and a purpose behind every part of the activity that we have planned. So there are really key differences in a gardening group and a therapeutic horticulture group. We're definitely not a multi-level marketing scheme. So there's been people have had questions like, are you trying to just sell me some herbal pills? And I am not trying to sell anybody herbal anything. But I'll pass out free herb cuttings, no problem. So we'll go through briefly a history of therapeutic horticulture. So you can see that it didn't just drop out of the sky 5 years ago. It's been around for a really long time. So there's we know that 2,000 plus years ago, there were really beautiful gardens that were planted in arid Mesopotamia. And they were meant as a respite for people who were in physical or emotional distress. And it was a place where people could stop and travel The oases were used that way. Hanging Gardens of Babylon. This is always an interesting fact. In ancient Persia, which is in the same general region, the concept of paradise gardens began. So the houses would be built in sort of a U shape or a square shape. In the center of a house would be this walled garden. It would have a water element in the middle, and then 4 squares around the water element. And each square represented some very specific thing to the family. And there would be benches. You could picture yourself in the hot climate, sitting out there with some shade over you, and fragrant plants and the water running. And it was a really lovely respite. And people would invite, the outside of the house would be kind of forbidding, but the inside would be really beautiful with this paradise garden in the middle. And it's still a garden style that's observed today in that region, and it's been inspired and taken out into other places as well. But paradise, the word paradise etymologically means walled garden. So I think that's kind of exciting. And moving forward in history a little bit, writings from the monk Saint Bernard prescribed a walk in the garden to calm anxiety and ease sadness. So not just for fellow monks, but for people who had come to the monastery to escape the travails of everyday life. They prescribed walking in the beautiful gardens of the monastery. And in many monasteries, there's still evidence and still records of physic gardens. You've probably heard of Chelsea Physic Garden, which wasn't at a monastery, but they were gardens that grew healing herbs that were known to alleviate some of the symptoms of pretty terrible diseases that people had at that time. So the physic gardens were tended for years and years, and the people tending them had the benefits of being around the plants too. So Dr. Benjamin Rush was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, the father of psychiatry in the United States, what became the United States. He helped found the University of Pennsylvania, and he was also in his spare time, he was the supervisor of what was then called an insane asylum. We would think of it as a mental health hospital nowadays, but in all of the writings, it's referred to as insane asylum, which is just not a term we would use. But he had these people that he was responsible for their medical care as their physician. And because of the stratification of society, some people could pay their way through the hospital and other people could not afford to pay their way through. If you couldn't afford to pay, then you were welcome to help pitch in and do some of the work. Well, what he found in this informal economic experiment was that the people who had to work outside and help tend the gardens were doing better than the ones that were able to just sit inside and not go out if they didn't want to. So he was finding that people who were forced to do the hard labor were finding that there were mental health benefits from that. So he was surprised. And then he started prescribing that everybody go out and spend some time in the garden doing the digging and helping. He said it's prescriptive, it had a curative effect, everybody's going to do it. So even in the 1780s, there was some evidence that this worked. So moving forward in time again, World War I and II, there were vocational programs for veterans that came home from the wars with missing limbs or other injuries, and in the extended care facilities that were provided to help rehabilitate them. The going out and spending time in the garden was seen as not just a useful and productive activity, but something where they could learn to use the prosthetic limbs in a more natural setting than in a clinical space. And even today, that's something that we use in therapeutic horticulture and horticultural therapy. It's to get people outside into natural, normal environments during rehabilitation. It just makes sense. You're not necessarily going to be in a clinical place once you go home. So they wanted people to be able to navigate a normal daily life. Going out in the garden helps to do that. And victory gardens during both World Wars helped on the home front to help loved ones feel connected to the people that were gone, as well as to feed their families. So the letters after my name each year come from more letters, AHTA, that's the American Horticultural Therapy Association. That was founded about almost 50 years ago. And during that time, it was a way for the people who had been doing garden club work in therapeutic horticulture to come together and create a more professional atmosphere and a way to support people doing this professionally. So while the profession was being established, people in garden clubs sponsored what became therapeutic horticulture. And then once we saw that all these benefits were, all these anecdotal benefits were racking up, scientists started saying we really ought to do some research and legitimize this. We all know it works, but we want to see why it works. So universities at that time started offering advanced trainings and courses and eventually degrees in both horticultural therapy and therapeutic horticulture. So we're here to talk about science. So now you know a little bit about the history. Let's figure out why this works. We all know it does, but it is an evidence-based practice. And that's, I think, important to remember that while we all know going out in the garden is great, it's nice to know why it works, I think, and how the techniques help people to manage different challenges and different conditions. So you know what to choose. What might help. We publish it, and AHTA publishes a peer-reviewed journal every year that has a good selection of studies. It's practitioners. The one thing I thought was really interesting, coming from a social work background as I do, in general, and probably in most of the sciences, there's a branch of the profession that conducts the research, and another branch of the profession that's in practice, in direct practice. In therapeutic horticulture and in horticultural therapy, the practitioners are the ones doing the research. I thought that was pretty great, that anybody holding a group can consult with the university and say, I think something interesting is happening here. I would like to participate in research, and you can collaborate that way and contribute to the profession very directly without having to assemble a group, come up with, all of the elements of a clinical study. You can do it in real time and figure out the control group, but you can do research on a group that you're actually organically conducting. I think is pretty wonderful. So real programs are studied rather than programs formed to create a study. And then that way it preserves, I think, the integrity of the people that are participating, because it keeps them first. And in therapeutic horticulture, we try to put people first. So our studies show up in a lot of different journals other than AHTA's journal. So you can find our stuff all over the place. If you're interested in going down a rabbit hole, the Florida State University has an incredible research database with thousands and thousands of studies. So I bow to them for collating those, keeping up with those. They cull the ones that they think are too old. So it's usually no more than 6 years old. And so we can, anytime we need to pull research or figure out why I would like to do this, I would like to see some evidence for why this works, we can find that. So thinking about why therapeutic horticulture does work on people, we have a few theories that we look at. And back in the 1970s at the University of Michigan, Rachel and Stephen Kaplan were working together. They're applied psychologists. And together they developed the attention restoration theory. And what that is, what we all are doing right now, there are two different kinds of attention they studied. So voluntary or directed attention is what you all are doing right now. And me too. I'm directing my attention at our presentation, and you all are paying attention to me. And that's directed attention. We only have so much of that we can do before our attention wanders. We're concentrating, we're paying attention, we're assimilating information. We get fatigued with use. And as in academia, we all know that this is true, that there's an endpoint to how long you can pay attention. So the opposite of that is involuntary attention. And that's when you're captured by a stimuli in the environment. So if you go for a walk outside and a bus honks or a bird flies over, you hear a helicopter, those are involuntary things in the environment that catch your attention. And that's very, it's restorative to your brain. It fires a different part of your brain, and it resets your ability to have directed attention again. So it's really important to take those breaks where engaging involuntary attention where you're not, you're letting things come at you and then once you get back, you've restored your brain and you feel refreshed again. It's almost like having a nap. But nature, they found nature assists the most in recovery from this attention fatigue. They've done many different tests over the years. It's replicated many times. The helicopter isn't going to do it. The bus honking isn't going to do it. But going out and just exploring nature and seeing colors, literally stopping to smell the roses. So this is E.O. Wilson. He passed away a couple years ago, but he had an amazing life as a biologist and a researcher. And his theory was biophilia. So he wrote a book by the same name and was very well known for talking about this for the latter part of his career. But biophilia is just the instinctive bond that we have as between humans and other living systems. So whether it's animals or plants or just other living things, we're hardwired to reach out to nature just as part of our innate biology. Can't help it. So even people that are raised in concrete jungles have this biophilia, and it wakes up when they're in nature. The rest of us can find it pretty easily from here, but not everybody. Another theory is, this one is really interesting, is prospect refuge theory. So this was explored by Appleton back in the 90s. And it's where humans are a grassland species. Just in evolutionary terms, we're from open grasslands. So we have this hardwiring to look for prospect and refuge. So refuge is an area, you can see it in the first picture with the bench. So there's a place where you can rest. Behind you, there's a refuge. So there's nobody can sneak up on you in theory. But from the refuge, you have a long view. So you can look down on the second picture and see that there's this long view, and that's the refuge, prospect and refuge. And it's experienced as peaceful and calming because you can relax, you're not under attack, you can see the future from here. And that's considered very calming. So we try to plan our spaces that way and provide spaces that have both prospect and refuge for participants. So talking about some of the benefits that you can get from therapeutic horticulture. Physiological, people think of that one first because I think it makes a lot of sense. You always try to work for any kind of increased physical activity with participants. Even if it's just people sitting at a table doing work at a table, you can work on trunk control and manual dexterity and hand-eye coordination. It doesn't have to be people working like in the picture there. But it involves, typical gardening involves walking and bending and stretching. You can always improve people's balance and coordination, have that be a goal. Increased flexibility is a good one as well. So we try to incorporate all those movements as much as we can. And even when we're setting up a space, so if we were going to use this table that's in front of us right here, which is just a long table, we could set the elements of our activity just out of reach. So people have to reach a little bit to get what they need. And that accomplishes a goal without them even knowing it. We do talk about it later, though. Some of the psychological benefits. There's reduced stress and anxiety. Just spending the time in nature and engaging in mindful activities can lower your stress levels and improves your mood and can boost happiness. And it doesn't cure depression, but it can reduce some of the symptoms. And what I always say to people when we're talking about this part is gardening and therapeutic horticulture don't solve your problems, but they can help reset you so that when you go back to your problems, you're a little bit different than you were when you left them in the first place. You might have a little bit more fortitude to attack them at that point. And gardening can enhance your self-confidence. So you can increase your own self-regard and say, I did that. I was able to grow that. And even if it's not something you were able to grow, at least you tried. And that's more than when you started. So always opportunities for self-confidence. And I don't know if you all know about this or not, if this gets discussed outside of therapeutic horticulture circles, but there's an interesting study that was done it's quite a while back now. The physician that was doing this study was a lung cancer researcher, and he had a theory that Mycobacterium vaccae, which is it's a non-pathogenic bacterium that's in natural soil, would help his lung cancer patients. So he had them work in the soil and he measured their levels pre and post exposure. And, he thought that would help shrink the tumors along with the typical treatment that they were getting. And it didn't. Their lung cancer progressed as it was expected to, but they reported feeling elevated mood. They reported their depression lifting. They reported in general, just feeling better, just a better sense of hope and well-being, even though they still had lung cancer. And even though at the time, lung cancer was, pretty much a fatal disease at that point, their outlook changed. And he said, well, something's going on here. So he partnered with other researchers, and they discovered that this mycobacterium that they had isolated acted in the same channels as antidepressants in the brain. So it doesn't replace antidepressants necessarily, but it definitely helps. So when you use sterile soil, that's not with the soil is mixed, that does not have the mycobacterium, but there are different strains of this all over in native natural soils. So it's always a good idea, if there aren't any reasons, to always use some native soil mixed in, because you're releasing this non-pathogenic bacterium and breathing it in. And we're all benefiting from that whenever we're out in the soil. I think that's pretty great. And what we think just in the profession is this is one agent that we know of that's been studied. There are most likely many other agents that are acting in a similar way for our health. So that's kind of wonderful to know. So another thing people don't always pick up on at first, but there's a ton of cognitive stimulation when you're working in the garden. Gardening activities enhance memory. You have to remember where you put things. You have to remember the names of plants or know where to find them. It's directing your attention to a task that is stepwise, so you have to follow many steps to get where you need to go. And as we all know, if you work with plants, there's lots and lots of opportunities for problem solving. Lots of opportunities for problem solving, and also collaborative problem solving, which is really nice. So you're not in this alone. You have the rest of the group. Let's figure out what's going on here. Let's troubleshoot this, come up with a solution. So all of that uses the brain in gardening. Is something that a lot of the participants that we work with have cognitive issues that they want to work on, and we can use something that's actually very interesting and has an outcome to help with their cognitive issues. I think that's kind of a fun outcome. And speaking of collaborative problem solving, social benefits are pretty important too. When we're gardening in a group, we have social interactions, and it helps people when they're working side by side. It can be easier for people to foster social connections than if we're face to face. It can be intimidating for people that are not used to social interactions or feel intimidated by that, to be working next to somebody and talk to them. And it increases people's self-esteem. Just having any success at all can help them feel like I did something and I accomplished something. And it's more than just sitting on the couch and watching game shows all day. I was out with people and I did something and I helped plan. Provides a meaningful activity for people and a sense of purpose when they're taking care of things. A lot of the populations that I work with are in care. Somebody is taking care of them. And when they're in a therapeutic horticulture group, the tables are turned and they're taking care of something else. And just that shift is really meaningful. And you don't think about it if that's not your life situation. But if you would kind of put yourself in their shoes and think about somebody that has to rely on another person or another group of people for every element of their life, and they don't have a lot of choices, to be able to just take care of a plant or a small part of a garden is huge. It just helps them feel like a person again. That's something that the garden can give that even people sometimes can't. Plants don't judge you either. Most of them don't. So different applications. We see therapeutic horticulture used in healthcare quite a bit. So in hospitals and rehab centers, long-term care facilities where people are usually inside, and we can help get them outside. Just a little bit of extra work. It's a good thing. Mental health places can benefit because we know about the Mycobacterium vaccae and we know about all of the different benefits. Psychiatric hospitals and community mental health centers often have therapeutic horticulture programs because it can be pretty non-threatening to say, let's go work with some plants together. And then we'll work our way up to some of the other stuff that's going on, but right now we're going to work with some plants. And it can get people talking. Correctional facilities are a really interesting place to do therapeutic horticulture. So when you're not in a correctional facility, you can be dealing with transportation issues for people to get to your group. But in a correctional facility, the whole population is right there. So everybody's there and can participate and help take care of the garden and make outcomes happen without having to worry about missing sessions. And for people that are incarcerated, it's the same reason. They're dependent on other people for making all of the decisions about what they do. In that case, they can take care of something, have a meaningful impact on something that doesn't judge them and just wants to grow. Schools and special education programs and after-school programs do really well with therapeutic horticulture because kids that have attention challenges, it's like almost flipping a switch when we go out into the therapeutic horticulture arena. It's like their attention focuses on what we're doing together. It's pretty great. And you don't have to have a diagnosis to benefit from this. It's just sometimes about wellness and about just being people together. So community gardens, senior centers, assisted living, people who are burnt out from work just want to get together and spend some time with plants feeling better can benefit from therapy. And so here's some examples of practice that I've done before. These are therapeutic horticulture sessions. There's the one on the left is a skilled nursing facility, so long-term care. And then we have a master gardener volunteer group that's working on the right-hand side with adults that have intellectual disabilities, and they are putting a plant sale together. So they're sorting and organizing things for a plant sale. And we have an assisted living on the left, and we started seedlings and we are potting them on into a larger container. It's about this time of year, a couple of years ago. So the seedlings had outgrown the little cells, so we needed to move them up a pot size before they were ready to go out in the garden. And this is a good example of how we can include everybody. So one of my tenets is everybody gardens. The group that was in here at the tables did not have the body ability to get down in the soil and garden like some of their peers, but they were able to do all the potting up. So we were able to take the seed cell packs, move them up a pot size, write the plant tag labels, and get them back into the growing light for another month or so before it was time to get them out in the garden. And in that way, they could all participate. And when we had our harvest later in the season, these were people that had participated just as much as the folks that put everything out in the garden and tended it. So we got to include everyone. The middle picture is what the garden looked like, middle of summer, and another picture of people potting things up. So there's some research trends. Right now, I see a lot of emphasis on diverse populations and physiological and biomarker evidence for efficacy. Not so much in the United States. We're still emerging. We're still sort of an emerging nation in terms of doing the research here, although there is quite a bit out of the United States. South Korea, we had a researcher that visited us last year from South Korea to talk about the biomarker research that her lab is doing. And it's astonishing. They're testing saliva before and after an intervention to look at serotonin levels and other biomarkers to actually pinpoint and prove that these interventions are what is working. Not just that it works, but why it works and what exactly is working. Mental health always is an important topic, but I think since the pandemic especially, that's emerged as something that tends to get more funding and more attention, and that is a good thing. That's important. And then quality of life research for populations that have significant and persistent health issues. Cancer, dementia, neurodegenerative diseases. There's a lot of research in those areas as well, because we see that these are therapies that can help improve people's lives. So we want to know more about the underlying brain mechanisms of why therapeutic horticulture works. And that's significant. Technology integration is kind of one of the fun cutting edge areas. There's lots of sensors to mimic being outside. There's virtual reality to help enhance therapeutic outcomes, especially for people that are not able to easily get outside. Can we replicate that experience, and will we have the same outcomes? And what are the differences, and how can we close that gap if there's a difference? So those are some of the areas of research that we're seeing. We want to know the long-term impact of an intervention. So if we put a group together in the spring and we see everybody through the growing season and everybody has a wonderful time and measurable outcomes, how are they 6 months from now? Does that last? Does that last, or do we need to continue the intervention? We think we know what the answers are, but we need to prove that with research. And then we want to make sure that we're always researching diverse populations so that we know that these results are replicable to different populations. And that's common sense with human research. But we want to, a lot of the research I'm seeing right now is replicating previous studies, but with different groups to see if we get similar outcomes or surprisingly different outcomes. Both are valid and important. So you might be wondering, how does this affect me? How does this affect you? If your research, the work that you're doing involves a people or plant connection, I am and my colleagues are in contact with programs across the state, across the country, and across the world. It's not a huge community, but it's a significant one. So if there's people you need to get in contact with, I can help you find those people and get you connected. Plant breeders that have successful cultivars, easy to grow things, can always find consumers in therapeutic horticulture, because a lot of what we do requires that our participants have reasonable success with the plants. So we don't start people with things that are really difficult to grow or fussy to grow. Even if they think they want to, we kind of push them toward things that root easily and grow easily so that they have that element of success. And then once they become expert horticulturists, we can move on to the advanced things. But anytime we have a user-friendly cultivar that's something that grows well, we want to use that in our programs. And then I think it's important to keep raising awareness of this practice for your students, so that people who are thinking of their place in horticultural science and weighing, well, I really want to work with people, but also with plants, there's a way to do that. And that's therapeutic horticulture, or horticultural therapy is a really viable and wonderful way to bring those two things together and be able to stick with plants and help people at the same time. So we have lots of resources. Top one is I think the QR code goes straight to the top link there. That's the page that I maintain through Extension. I am the current president of the Carolinas Horticultural Therapy Network. That's a group that covers technically North and South Carolina, but we have people on our board that are from Florida and Tennessee. So I'm not sure Carolinas is the best descriptor of that group. Maybe it's more of a Southeast Horticultural Therapy Network. But there are a couple hundred of us right now, and we're all in practice in countless different ways. And it's a fantastic group. We have free webinars every other month. So we've got a lot of interesting things going on, and anybody is welcome to attend those if you want to learn a little bit more about what we do. And then the link will take you to the online therapeutic horticulture courses that lead to a certificate. So if you take all 4 of the courses, you get a certificate in therapeutic horticulture. You know most of what I know at that point. And you can think about setting up your own practice. And if you have students that are interested in that, that's a good resource to pass along. So that's what I know. Any questions?
questions for Amy. Can I open up your question? Given the benefits, does health insurance recognize some of these?
It's a great question. Right now, therapeutic horticulture, freestanding or hort therapy is not recognized by insurance. So what we do is we use our other certifications and degrees to bill for insurance. So I can bill as a social worker and carry it that way and use therapeutic horticulture as the modality for my therapy. We're getting there though. It's getting better. There's, I think the state of Illinois, their Medicaid program is considering reimbursing registered horticulture therapists. And usually what we found with other therapies is once Medicaid gets on board, then other insurances will get on board in that state. So we're not there for North Carolina yet, but we're starting to see that change a little bit. And that would open things up tremendously. In England, in the UK, it's covered through the National Health Service. NHS covers hort therapy services. So it's a booming field over there. I mean, gardening is sort of in the DNA in England, but there are foundations, there are public gardens that have programs. So once it's a covered service, it takes off pretty quick.
It's a great presentation, Amy.
Thank
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit more about what are the activities going on in some of the counties? You mentioned that there are county programs. How many are,
That's a great question.
what's the scope of that?
Yeah, so it changes, the scope changes as interests and abilities change, but so the program I think that's been going on the longest is down in New Hanover County. We have a county agent named Heather Collegian that's been doing she's been running the ability garden there for about 10 years. And that's a garden that's, I think, right next to the cooperative extension building. And anybody can go there and walk around and see what they're doing, but they have contracted programs for a number of different populations. So they've got some groups with the schools that come in and bring kids that have different abilities, and they do garden activities. They've got some older folks that come in. There's a contract. She goes out to the senior center. There's some formerly incarcerated folks that come in and do a lot of the heavy lifting. She said she couldn't run her program without that group, so they're pretty handy. But that's one example. So she's got a dedicated space. Then Wake County, where we are right now, has the Master Gardener program, and that's, I think, 6 or 7 years old now. And that's a group of master gardeners, and by group, I mean, there's about 60 of them that are split into teams, and they cover senior centers, assisted living, skilled nursing facilities, and a couple of just community groups. And they'll go out and they have like a theme for the month, so they'll do the same activity, fortunately for everybody. So they don't have to plan that many different groups, but every month they have a different theme and they take that out to all their different sites. So that's Wake County. There's a group out in Asheville that up until things happened last year, they were getting a lifelong gardening seminar together. So they were teaching in the community using adaptive tools, which is, I think there was a picture in there of a table of adaptive tools, teaching people how to use different tools for different abilities. So, and why you would choose them and how, you know, because they kind of look funny, these curved shovels, why you would pick that up and how to use it. So those are just a few examples. And then I get calls all the time from agents that are interested in putting together something and doing a pilot program. So what I always recommend is that they do what we call a seed program first. So not literally seeds, although it could be, but doing a one-off program in their community to see if it's something that would be accepted, and if just to gauge the level of interest so that they don't plan a whole growing season program and have it dwindle, to do a small program first. So I help people get that process started to gauge the level of interest and then get a program together. If they find that, you know, that brings people out and that there's a lot of interest, they're good to go. I was just I did a talk with Lee County the other day. They've got a group of master gardeners that's just getting off the ground with their culture. So it's growing here in North Carolina.
I was wondering, you had it as a research need, but what are you seeing so far in terms of long-term effects of these types of programs?
What we're seeing is that if people stay connected to plants, they have long-term effects, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the same conditions as the study. So even if they're not able to continue participating in a facilitated group, if they've gained the skills to take care of plants in their own space, even if it's house plants at home, we see that the gains last. But if people go back to not working with plants or being out in nature, if they haven't changed those personal habits, we see the gains diminish over time. So sort of common sense, but we think it's important to follow up with people frequently and make sure that they have the ability to connect with plants, especially if that is a barrier for them.
So I wondered, like with institutions or elder care places.
Yeah.
Is the model mostly that the institution will try to organize a program? Or do a lot of people come in as independent contractors and then interface with those institutions? Both, yeah.
Both.
Yeah.
So I've seen it done both ways, and I've been the contractor
Right.
in that case. So it kind of depends on the staff of an institution. If they've hired an activities director that has some science background,
Right.
which they do exist, that person will come in with enthusiasm and want to take care of things and put a program together. And in the absence of that interest or ability, having a contractor come in that knows how to do that and is coming in regularly, make sure that the plants are taken care of and that the people are, connected in a meaningful way to what's going on. And I didn't put the slide in this presentation, but I was a contractor 3 years ago for an assisted living facility. And in my first walkthrough, I took pictures because I need to see the scale of what I'm working with. And they had these really beautiful raised beds that somebody had built. And there were just like weeds growing in the raised beds, 6 raised beds. And I took a picture of that, mainly for the dimensions, but it's turned out to be a really good example of what happens if the people meant well and they didn't follow through. And if you don't know about plants and gardening, you might not know that you can't just put the plants in there and hope for the best. That's not going to happen, especially not in a raised bed. So I always put that in to illustrate what happens if you get a program started and you don't have the ability to sustain it. It becomes an eyesore, and all the windows, all the residential windows of this facility looked out on that garden, and that was like, I thought it was kind of depressing to have that be your view out your window, is this neglected raised bed garden. So that was the project when I was there, was to pull all that out and get something growing in there that looked a whole lot better. And that ended up on their marketing, like on their front marketing page. Not me, the residents did it. They grew the plants and took care of the plants. So, well, however it gets done, it's significant for people to be able to see something that makes their day better, especially when that's a place that they have to stay most of
Just wanted to comment, wonderful presentation and beautiful work that you do. Maybe 20 years ago, Nancy Easterly, at the Botanic Garden.
Yeah.
I did minor collaborations with them, and they had a very strong program.
time.
And I was curious that you have this relationship. What is their role in your, what do they do?
Yeah, they still have a very strong program. They're amazing. My colleagues over there are the therapeutic horticulturists. So they have, we co-teach the courses together. So we share the teaching load pretty evenly. We do the admin over here at NC State. So our wonderful reporter system and our Moodle system, that's all from NC State. And then teaching expertise comes from both sides. And a lot of the pictures and the cool stuff in our slide programs are from the botanical garden. But they do outreach. They have a therapeutic horticulture garden within the botanical garden. So there's a building and then a plaza that has raised beds, and that can be used for on-site programming. And then they have, I think right now, 6 or 7 different outreach contracts where they go out once a week and once or twice a week. Farm at Penny Lane is twice a week. So that's for people that have severe and persistent mental health issues. And they come out and they bring groups of people there and take care of the farm. And that's a significant, that's been going on for, I think, over 10 years now. And then other programs, they've got assisted living, they've got long-term care, Carolina Meadows, all 3 levels of care have a contract person going in there, which is pretty great. And then they'll have some other contracts that are short-term just for the growing season. So for 2025, I haven't seen what they're doing yet this year. But they've just hired, about the same time I started last year, they hired a second person to do the outreach there. So it's a growing concern, which is a good thing. And it's a wonderful partnership.
How many members do the association has?
The
Association of,
AHTA,
yes,
I believe we have, I think we're around 500 members right now. So it's a small-ish group. And just a fun fact, they move the annual conference around the country every year. So it's online every other year and it's in person every year that it's not online. And it was in Cary. It's just right down the street last September.
my follow-up question is how this association is connected to American Association of Horticultural Science?
They're very closely, there are a lot of people that are in both. And so that it's a close connection and a collaboration in a lot of ways, because the plants are very important. I was asked when I first started here why I'm not in the social work department, because that's my background and been doing it for decades. Because the plants are really important to what we do, and the horticultural science is what makes all of it work. So the people part is extremely important for therapeutic horticulture, but the plant knowledge is essential. And I've seen a lot of programs not do well because somebody goes in with enthusiasm and goes out to, the Walmart garden center and buys a flat of plants. And they're gonna plant and have a garden this year. And then they realize that they're in over their head pretty much when they get back to wherever they started. So you really do have to come out with both, you have to have both hats and be really good at both to have a successful program and to make sure that the people have success as part of it. Because the last thing you want is for nothing to go well. Our participants usually have a lot of nothing going well, so we don't want that in our groups too.
I was wondering how often you encounter resistance from individuals and how you deal with it. I'm just thinking like some of my daughter's friends or like family members.
Yep.
This would actually stress them out a lot.
Yep.
If they were to go
Yep.
out.
Yeah, I talk about not having stress in the garden, and there's always somebody that says, my garden stresses me out so much. Yes, it does. That's totally valid. There's always somebody in a group that resists, absolutely. So the nice thing about, horticultural therapy requires active participation. That's part of it. It's one of the goals. Therapeutic horticulture, passive participation is fine. So having an audience or observers is totally fine. You're gonna get something out of it. You might not get as much out of it as the rock star who's making the sunflowers grow before your eyes, but you're still going to get something out of it. So we'll have people that say, I want to watch, or I don't want to do this right now. Totally fine. Just can hang out over here. I always have a small group of activities that are not as plant related. So I can have people writing name tags for the plants, plant tags. I can have people sorting the seeds by different types, or look on there and see if it's annual or perennial and make 2 piles for us. Or let's get the flowers and the vegetables in 2 different piles. So they're sorting seed packets. They don't want to do the plants. There's a lot of resistance to dirt. We know it as soil, but our participants will call it dirt. I don't want to get my hands in the dirt. Okay, so that's fine. I have a container with a lid that has perlite in it. And we can start with perlite as like a sensory step up. So I'll have them put their hands in the perlite, which falls right off, just shake it right off. And eventually they can move toward having soil on their hands as they see that it's not so bad. And they'll see everybody else, because we're social animals, so we'll see other people having fun. And they'll eventually get to the point where a lot of them do participate eventually. Sometimes it takes them a little while to warm up. Yeah, that's a good question.
Speaking of dirt,
Yeah.
the mycobacterium story is interesting.
Isn't it though?
How would a palmologist suspect that there'd be some characteristic in soil?
Yeah.
bacteria.
Yeah, I think because he was so sensitive to what was in people's lungs, he saw that there was something in there that wasn't in there normally. And he was experimenting with different inhalable agents to try and reduce tumors. And he thought, they had done work in South America, trying to isolate different compounds that people might be able to inhale to help with tumor reduction. And he saw that there was some kind of a change with this. While it didn't reduce the tumors, it reduced the anxiety and the hopelessness and just increased the coping skills of the people that were dealing with that. So anecdotally, as gardeners, we know it just feels better to be out in the dirt, but now we have maybe one of the reasons why that works. And like I said, there's the theory that that's one compound that we know about, and that there are probably many, many more that are yet to be discovered that are doing different beneficial things for us.
Very well. Just one more question.
Are programs such as these being implemented at the collegiate level for college students or?
Yep. Yeah, there's a group here on campus called Campus Nature RX. I'm part of that. And what we do is help participate in wellness days and facilitate activities for students because it's stressful being a student. I've been there, we've all been there. It's just stressful being a student. So helping people, especially people that live in dorms or apartments that don't have gardens necessarily right at their disposal, to still stay connected to nature is really important. There's a lab over at the Hill Library, just right here. I don't know if anybody's been in there, but it has a 360 projection screen, and they have a video of, is it Umstead Park? It's one of the parks, but it's projected on all the screens. You can go in there with your books and just study for a little while, or just sit there and look at the water and the leaves, and it's just a nice. It's a virtual reality, but it makes you feel like you're in there. So we're doing things like that. We're doing guided walks. We're doing indoor plant, like adopt a plant activities. So things like that to just help students stay connected to nature.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Thank you.
Feel so much better.
Oh, wonderful.